300 wild bisons charged towards the chief's daughter. What this cowboy did was truly unexpected. The thunderous rumble of hooves grew louder, drowning out the rustling leaves and the rustling of his thoughts. Jake Ramirez felt the ground beneath him tremble, half wondering if he was still awake. Wild bison, 300 strong, surged toward the town of Elkhorn, and the image of Ayanna, the chief's spirited daughter, flashed in his mind. What would he do? He'd sworn to uphold his family's legacy on the ranch, the sweat and toil of generations resting heavy on his shoulders. Yet the pull of something larger pressed against him, something he dared not define. Each dawn, he rose before the sun, tackling chores that mirrored the uncertain path his life had taken. His roping skills, once polished and sharp, had dulled under the weight of responsibilities no 25-year-old should bear. The upkeep of the ranch alone demanded his full attention since his father fell ill. Jake hesitated, feeling the ache of abandoned rodeo dreams. The bright lights, the adrenaline of the wild ride across the arena? Forgotten. Now the grit and grind of the land filled his days, mending fences, tending to livestock, and he was fueled by pride but shackled by duty. But now, as the wild bison thundered toward them, a fresh dilemma loomed. Ayanna had called for his help against a rancher invading her tribe's ancestral lands. The weight of this choice tightened his chest. Supporting her meant confronting the legacy of his own family, a legacy etched in land and loyalty. The bison, vital to her culture, surged forward, representing more than just wildlife. They signified a connection to all that was sacred to her people. An image formed in his mind, Ayanna's fierce determination, the fight for preservation. But what about his fight? His father needed him. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The panic clenching in his gut told him he would have to choose between steadfastness and change, tradition and progress. He glanced toward Ayanna, standing firm but visibly shaken. Did she see him as a friend or foe? Would he be a traitor to his own blood if he intervened? Gazes met, and in that moment of shared uncertainty, he grasped the reality that they were both in the path of a raging storm threatening to sweep away everything they knew. With every pounding hoofbeat, the intensity of what lay ahead deepened. Each second stretched like a taut rope ready to snap. Fear coursed through him. If he intervened, he risked his family's ranching legacy. If he stood by, he might let Ayanna, someone he had come to care for, face unimaginable loss. The choice burned in his core. In a heartbeat of clarity, Jake knew he could not turn away. The heat of the moment drove him forward, preparing to place himself between the raging bison and the land that meant everything to Ayanna. But with each step came the heavy awareness of stakes far beyond his own. All at once, internal conflict spiraled into a chaotic whirlwind. His heart raced, thoughts collided, and muscle tension buzzed under his skin as desperation surged up from the depths of his soul. Would he have the courage to protect their future, or would he ultimately forsake both? What echoes would resound from the choices he'd make today? In that swirling chaos, Jake stood at the brink. What came next would either shatter him or forge an unbreakable bond between two worlds. Jake's heart thundered louder than the stampede itself, driving him towards Ayanna, whose fierce gaze seemed to beckon for him to act. This was it. In that fraction of a moment, he felt alive. Every nerve ending ignited by urgency and purpose. He had a choice. Stand firm in his inherited duty, or take a step toward a new destiny beside Ayanna. Riding on instinct more than reason, he reached for the reins of the old mare, Luna, who had been his companion through countless trials on the ranch. As he mounted, the familiar ways of the ranch washed over him. His knowledge of the terrain, the rhythms of life that came with every dawn. Yet today was different. Today called for something beyond mere preservation of legacy. He spurred Luna into a gallop, feeling her powerful muscles beneath him, a surge of adrenaline pushing away the doubts. With each stride, the distance between him and the herd lessened, and he caught sight of the bison pouring into view, rolling over the earth like an unforgiving tide. Their intent, ferocious and unyielding, was a panic-inducing sight, one that mirrored the turmoil inside him. But it was Ayana's voice, steady and unwavering, that ignited something deep within Jake. "Jake!" she shouted, her spirit resonating. "We have to turn them back, together!" Her confidence sparked the dormant bravery in him. They were fighting for more than just land. They were fighting for identities, both her people's and his own. With Ayana's encouragement echoing in his mind, Jake reined in Luna, directing her straight toward the lead bull, who stood testament to the symbol of power and resilience. Would he have the nerve to confront what had always seemed so distant from his reality? He planned to press forth, not just for the bison, but also for that connection he felt with Ayana, knowing that the stakes transcended mere land disputes. The thundering herd overshadowed his thoughts once more, and fear flickered in the air, heavy and palpable. Yet, he guided Luna alongside Ayana, who seemed to mirror his movements in a fluid synchrony born of mutual understanding. The intensity of their purpose knit them closer, two souls bound together in the face of nature's relentless wrath. Understanding began to crystallize in Jake's mind. He wasn't merely a continuation of his family's legacy. He was rather a bridge to what could be. He realized now that he had the potential to create a new narrative, one where preservation didn't mean forfeiting his identity, but enhancing it through collaboration with Ayana's community. There in that moment, Jake's loyalty expanded beyond land and tradition. It transformed into a commitment to fight for a shared future. They both had dreams worth protecting, and his rodeo aspirations could intertwine with Ayana's desire to maintain her heritage. But just as they began to rally the bison away from the town, a shout pierced through the cacophony. Jake turned to see the rival rancher, eager for confrontation, stride toward them. A scowl set deep on his weathered face. The man's stance radiated hostility, each step echoing a challenge as he surveyed Jake and Ayana's impromptu coalition. The time had come for a reckoning. Jake felt his pulse quicken, knowing that the real battle was just beginning and each decision would ripple through their intertwined destinies. Would he have the audacity to stand against the weight of his family's expectations, face his adversary, and claim his share of this untold story? All of it, his fear, his purpose, the stark reality of change, came crashing down upon him in that charged moment as he braced for the confrontation ahead. The ground trembled as the rival rancher advanced, his eyes narrowing in contempt, sizing up both Jake and Ayana as if they were threats to his dominion. Jake felt the weight of expectation suddenly magnified. The legacy he had inherited loomed larger than the weight of the world on his shoulders. He had faced down bulls before, but never one like this. "What do you think you're doing, boy?" the rancher barked, his voice like thunder rolling through the valley. "You're about to destroy everything your father built." Jake's mind raced as he processed the urgency of the present. This was no longer just a grudge between families. It was about redefining who he was and what he stood for. Ayana, poised at his side, radiated calm confidence. Her presence anchored him as the tide turned against them. "No, we're protecting this land and its heritage," Jake found himself replying, the words surprising even him. He hadn't fully grasped the depth of his conviction until those very moments crystallized it. The bison surged around them, a physical embodiment of their quest for home, and Jake felt the raw adrenaline pulse through him like a beacon. The rancher's face twisted into a sneer, revealing both contempt and disbelief. "Heritage? You think this is about heritage?" His fingers drummed against the gun belt at his waist. "You'll regret this foolishness. The land belongs to those who protect it." Jake clenched his jaw, a flush of defiance rising within him. "And I will protect it, but not in the way you think," he replied, locking eyes with Ayana briefly. They exchanged a wordless vow. This was their moment to stake their claim not just on the land, but on their futures. With a deep breath, Jake refocused on the herd before them. Luna shifted beneath him, sensing his urgency, and as he pressed her forward into a gallop, he felt renewed strength from the spirit of the mare that had carried him through countless trials. "Let's turn them!" Ayana shouted, her eyes alight with unwavering determination. He felt the heat of the confrontation simmering behind him, but in that moment, it didn't matter. Jake surged ahead, calling on instinct, drawing the bison with them like a formidable storm cloud that would reshape everything in its way. But as they maneuvered, Jake caught the glint of authority, The rancher had raised his weapon, a hidden threat that clawed at the back of his mind. A flicker of fear shot through him. This man was not just a rival. He was a symbol of everything Jake now wanted to challenge. Despite the chaos, there was an unsettling clarity. Jake began to understand that he was at a crossroads. Each hoofbeat pounded not just against the earth, but against a future filled with uncertainty and choices. The frightening empowerment of that moment struck him. He was deciding who he would become, unshackling himself from his father's shadow. "Don't back down," Ayanna cried, her voice cutting through the tension, urging him forward as they rallied the herd toward their goal. The bison moved, pressed by their instinct and their shared urgency for survival. But in the back of Jake's mind, he knew the greatest threat came not from the stampeding horde, but from the man whose fury could easily escalate. "Listen to yourself, Jake," he muttered quietly to himself, grappling with the growing conviction in his heart. "You have to change the narrative now." As the bison approached the town, the escalated tension turned into a palpable urgency. He was not just fighting for the land, but for his very identity, unwilling to let history dictate the course of his future. Out of the corner of his eye, Jake glimpsed the rancher destabilizing, stepping into a new level of aggression. It would only take one wrong move from him to unleash chaos, undermining everything they were fighting for. The moment was electric, charged with potential and peril. There was no turning back, only forward. The path ahead would test not just his mettle but reshape the legacy of whom he would become. As the tension coiled tighter, Jake prepared for the inevitable confrontation, knowing that his next move could either strengthen their rebellion against the status quo or break the fragile alliance he'd formed with Ayanna. But the question loomed large. Would he stand tall and face the uncertainty with courage, or would he falter and let the tides of predestined tradition pull him under? With a sharp inhale, Jake plunged deeper into a sea of uncertainty, every muscle in his body tense with the weight of the decisions ahead. As the bison thudded beneath him like a heartbeat echoing his own, he focused on Ayanna, whose unwavering belief gave him more strength than he realized he needed. The rancher loomed behind, shadowy and sinister, but Jake felt fortified by every stride of Luna, each galloping pulse a reminder of his purpose. "This isn't just another cattle drive," he whispered to himself, moments before issuing his next command. A deep breath steadied him. He was venturing into a battle for his very soul. "It's a declaration." Jake's mind flashed with images from his childhood, his father's voice echoing in the background, all the lessons imparted, the expectations molded into him like stone. Yet this moment was different. Each hoofbeat resonated with a promise he was beginning to unveil, a promise that he could forge his own path. As they rounded the last bend towards the town, the full scope of his mission crystallized. This wouldn't be merely about reclaiming the heritage the rancher insisted was solely his. It was about weaving that heritage into something new, something that could unite rather than divide. The realization struck him. He could blend honor with innovation instead of mere tradition. "Ayanna," he called, eyes blazing with determination. "If we can push them through the town, we can reach the other side and give the bison a chance to charge onto the protected land." She met his gaze, a storm of resolve reflected back at him. "You really think they'll follow?" "It's not just about guiding them," Jake replied, adrenaline coursing through him. "It's about inspiring them." She nodded, her trust in him igniting a spark of hope. As they surged forward, the towering energy of the bison surged alongside them, a living testament to the possibility of transformation that rippled through Jake's core, igniting instinct and ambition. But amid the rush, there remained a persistent undercurrent of anxiety. How far would the rancher take this confrontation? Jake felt the heaviness of his legacy still hanging in the balance. Would he trigger a sense of dominion in his adversary, or would he illuminate an alternative path? Suddenly, a crack of gunfire split the air, slicing through his thoughts like venom. Panic erupted, and Jake's instincts kicked in. His mind raced through potential consequences of not only this confrontation, but all future ones yet to come. The bison hesitated, their primal instincts sensing the sudden shift in the atmosphere, the pulse of danger threatening to fracture the unity they had just forged. "Hold steady," Jake shouted, not just to his horse or Ayanna, but to the swirling doubts in himself. He concentrated on the herd, gathering his focus as they swayed. Ayanna held her breath beside him, faith shimmering in her wide eyes. In that flash of crisis, Jake recalled the lessons his father had instilled deep within him. Yet now, instead of submitting to those dictates, he sought to transcend them. This was never meant to be about brute force. It was about courage, grace under pressure, and unwavering conviction in a vision so much larger than himself. Each moment counted. "Now is the time to show your true mettle," he murmured, igniting a sense of fierce protectiveness, recalling the promise he'd made to safeguard the land's legacy, not simply to act as an inheritor, but as a true steward. The herd began to move again, drawn not merely by instinct, but by Jake's momentum, his heart beating in tandem with the thunder of their hooves. It didn't feel like he was just riding a horse. It felt like he was becoming the spirit of the land itself, mending the fabric of its story. As they burst into the town square, confusion erupted amongst the townsfolk. Jake scanned the crowd, searching for allies, but his eyes fell back on the rancher, who had regained his footing, now even more furious. The man's face was a canvas of rage and determination. "Jake!" Ayanna shouted urgently, breaking through his reverie. "The rancher's pulling back to regroup with his men." Jake's heart raced. The next few moments would not just define his fate, but would further enshrine or dismantle the legacy of his family and the future he dared to chase. The confrontation he feared was on the horizon, pulling him relentlessly forward. Every bated breath fueled his conviction. The time had come, not just to charge towards victory, but to confront the very essence of his identity. Would he rise from the ashes of his father's shadow, or crash under the weight of his familial expectations? The answer awaited him in the blink of an eye. It rested in the tension hanging overhead. Jake felt the pulse of the moment thrumming through the air, charged with a mix of adrenaline and fear. The rancher's furious glare pinned him, promising that whatever came next would shape not only the bison's fate, but his own as well. Ayanna was beside him, a steady force amidst the chaos. Yet Jake could feel the chasm of uncertainty widening within him. What would it mean to take control of his destiny now? He met Ayanna's eyes. Her unwavering gaze reminded him what was at stake, a vision for the future that transcended the past. The rancher's men began to gather behind, forming a wall of potential violence. He had to act, but how? "Can you hold them back?" he asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil roiling inside him. Ayanna nodded, her expression resolute. "Just give me a signal." He turned back to the herd. The bison seemed to have sensed the shift in the air, their instincts urging them towards the sanctuary of the protected land. They were restless, skittish, alive with energy. Jake imagined the world they could create, the balance of tradition and innovation he longed for, a patchwork of heritage woven together into something fresh and vital. "All right, let's make our move," he said, the decision solidifying in his mind. With a flick of the reins, he nudged Luna forward. The bison followed, their movements synchronized with his own. Each step felt momentous, an uncharted path unfolding before him. But the rancher and his men weren't about to let it go easily. Jake could almost feel the tension radiating off them, a suffocating blanket of antagonism. Suddenly, the rancher's voice boomed through the air. "Stop! You're not taking them anywhere." Jake's heart raced. This was it, a moment to confront not just the rancher but the expectations binding him like chains. He urged Luna towards the front, forcing the bison into a fluid movement that created a living barrier between himself and the impending confrontation. "I'm not just a pawn in this game anymore," he declared, the weight of his father's legacy swirling around him like a storm. "I'm going to protect this land, and if you want to threaten the herd, you'll have to go through me." The challenge hung in the air. Silence enveloped the square, the townsfolk now mere spectators caught in the electric pause. Jake could see the rancher's expression shift, astonishment mingled with anger. It was a volatile mix, and Jake sensed he had struck a nerve. The rancher stepped forward, his face taut with rage. "You think you're worthy to stand against me? You're nothing but a boy lost in your fantasies." A fresh wave of doubt washed over Jake, but he shook it off. He'd been built from those very fantasies, grand visions of hope, heritage, and a future that reconciled his past with what lay ahead. "These aren't just fantasies, I'm living them, and you can't keep holding on to the past if it means destroying the future." Behind him, he felt Ayanna move to bolster their stand, her presence an anchor as they faced the storm head-on. "Think about what this land could be," What it deserves, he continued, his voice firm. We can't let fear dictate our actions anymore. The rancher hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty passing across his features. Jake's pulse quickened with the knowledge that this moment could pivot them all. He could either rally the townsfolk and shift the narrative or crumble under the oppressive weight of his father's expectations. Jake, Ayanna urged quietly, her voice weaving through the noise, now's our chance. Keep pushing. A primal instinct surged within him, fueled by desire and conviction. This was a negotiation not just with the rancher, but with himself. He wasn't just a cowboy battling tradition. He was carving out a space for growth, promising to build rather than destroy. As he stood there, the world seemed to hold its breath, the tension mounting in the heart of the town square. Would this clash ignite a spark of change, or would it plunge him back into the very shadows he sought to escape? Jake felt the weight of his decision crystallizing. The bison stirred at his back, alive with restless anticipation, mirroring his own hopes and fears. The moment needed to come to fruition, a confrontation of wills, a test of not just his mettle but his identity. Are you ready? He whispered to Ayanna, his resolve hardening as he turned back towards the rancher, determination etched on his face. What was he truly prepared to fight for? With the bison at his side and Ayanna as his ally, Jake was ready to stake everything on the defining battle of his life. The question loomed, would he finally overcome, or would he watch everything he cherished slip away? Jake's heart thundered as he faced the rancher, the challenge hanging in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Yet beneath the chaos, an undercurrent of clarity surged through him. This was not just about the bison or tradition. It was about forging a new identity, about the man he truly wanted to become, and it felt terrifyingly liberating. As he locked eyes with the rancher, Jake dug into the reserve of resilience he hadn't realized he possessed. He wasn't just standing in front of the herd. He was standing on a precipice of transformation, and he could sense the tipping point near. Ayanna's presence, solid and unwavering, anchored him in the shifting tides of the moment. Do you want to keep holding on to that old way? Jake said, his voice unwavering, though uncertainty crackled in his veins. Or can we create something that preserves what's valuable while moving towards something better? The rancher's response was an explosive snarl, but Jake saw hesitation flickering in his fierce glare. It dawned on him that this confrontation was more than a struggle for control. It was a pivotal moment where the past and future collided. He had a chance to turn his fear into action, to reclaim the narrative not just for himself but for everyone watching. Jake inhaled sharply, pulling in the courage that pulsated in his chest. The bison, restless behind him, mirrored his yearning for freedom and purpose. He sensed their energy coursing through him, fueling his determination to protect them, to redefine what it meant to cultivate the land. This land has stories entwined with ours, he pressed on, gathering momentum. But if we keep looking back, we'll trip over the very things we're trying to save. His assertion resonated even among some of the onlookers who had once stood firmly with the rancher. Jake could feel the unease rippling through the crowd, a shift, a beckoning toward possibility. Ayanna, ever perceptive, chimed in beside him. What Jake is saying is valid. Our heritage should guide us, not trap us. Together we can find common ground. Her words hung heavily, embedding themselves into the consciousness of the crowd. Jake watched as a few faces softened, and the unyielding sense of tradition shifted ever so slightly to the left, making way for reflection. Yet the rancher was not ready to yield. I know how to keep this land alive, he spat, stepping closer, brimming with wrath. You think you can challenge everything I've built here, on your whim? Fear tightened around Jake's chest, but he reminded himself of his purpose. Construction often started with deconstruction, even of the most intrepid ambitions. No, I'm not here to destroy, he declared, his voice gaining strength. I'm here to build on what you've done, not against it. The rancher's stance momentarily faltered, and in that flicker of doubt, Jake saw a path forward, a collective awakening waiting to unfold. But as quickly as the rancher hesitated, his resolve surged back. He raised his voice, transforming it into a roar. You've lost your way, Jake. You're no better than a traitor to our legacy. The pain in the rancher's eyes, a mix of fear and indignation, reflected Jake's own battle within. He forced himself to grapple with that truth. He was challenging the very foundation of their history. But what did it mean to stand firm for progress? To find one's voice amid clashing legacies? Maybe it's time we redefine what it means to be loyal, he shot back, each word laced with hard-won conviction. As he stood there, Jake saw potential. The bitter divide between them was fraught with possibility. It was the moment where madness might morph into understanding. He felt the Bisons shift restlessly, their growing tension echoing his rising resolve. The weight of the entire encounter engulfed him, pressing tightly around his chest. This was a point of no return, and the stakes were incredibly high. "Come on, Ayanna, let's show them what we're fighting for," he muttered, barely loud enough for her to hear. She nodded, her fierce determination resonating with his. There was no turning back from this confrontation. As the rancher prepared to counter, Jake gathered his thoughts. What would he unleash next? Would it be incriminating or liberating for everyone involved? With heart racing and choices crystallizing like fresh morning dew, Jake took a deep breath, ready for the unfolding conflict that would decide the direction of his life? What would he unveil in this battle? The price of change or the promise of evolution? The truth hovered poignantly in the air, waiting to be seized. Jake stood poised, the rancher's fury radiating off him like heat from a fire. Moments stretched thin, the air thick with tension. He could feel every pair of eyes in the crowd scrutinizing him, each breath tinging the atmosphere with judgment and fear. It was time for courage to take a front seat. He wouldn't just react. He had to act deliberately. "Loyalty means protecting what this land represents, not just for you but for the future," he asserted, his voice crisp, slicing through the noise. Fear of being dismissed remained, but he had to steady himself. This was not about winning an argument. It was about shaping a vision. For years he had grappled with his identity, but standing here with purpose ignited a light in him. The rancher, taken aback for a fraction of a second, seized the chance to strike again. "Your talk of the future ignores the very real foundation we stand on. Without the past, we have nothing but empty rhetoric." The rancher's words pierced through Jake, echoing the skepticism he often felt about his own aspirations. Could he truly envision a future while challenging the weight of a storied past? Nevertheless, he pressed on, determined to carve space for his thoughts. "Maybe true loyalty lies in evolving," Jake shot back. "We owe it to those who will come after us to embrace change. Clinging too tightly to the past risks suffocating us. The bison know this," he gestured toward the herd. "They roam free because they adapt to their environment. Do we not owe them and ourselves the same?" The crowd furrowed their brows in contemplation, and Jake noticed a subtle shift. Quiet nods started to ripple among those who had previously aligned themselves with the rancher. For the first time, he felt power coursing through him. Perhaps he could rekindle not just his own path, but that of others searching for something more meaningful. Ayanna's voice broke through the tension again. "When you fight for what's right, you're never a traitor to your roots," she chimed in. The resonance of her words, firm yet compassionate, bolstered Jake. Her conviction propelled him forward, solidifying his resolve. But the rancher's glare was unrelenting. "Your idealism is naive. I've worked tirelessly to preserve this land, and you think a few heartfelt speeches will change generations of understanding." Jake felt the ache of familial legacy slicing at his decisions, his lineage held tightly to tradition. This moment was personal. It could shatter everything he believed about himself or reinforce who he aspired to become. "And perhaps you're the one clinging to something broken. Fighting blindly against transformation is a form of betrayal too," he replied, unafraid. The rancher lunged forward, his fury simmering into something dangerously close to desperation. "What will you build on this land? The bison don't belong to you." "No, they don't," Jake countered, "but they represent an essential part of what I want the land to be." The crowd buzzed with uncertainty now, murmurs shifting like shadows, revealing cracks in the rancher's fortress. Jake could visualize his own vision, an expansive land that honored the past but flourished in growth. He remembered his father's words, "To build is to embrace risk." As he prepared his next statement, a bison snorted, drawing everyone's attention. In that moment of distraction, Jake saw an opening, a chance to provoke thought rather than anger. "If I'm not willing to risk challenging the past, how can I ever hope to dream of a future?" Silence ensued as everyone absorbed the weight of his words. Jake's heart raced. He could feel the path beneath him shifting unpredictably. There, amid a brewing storm, the tide felt ready to turn. But just as the suspicion in the crowd began to crystallize into tentative support, the rancher growled, "You think the herd will be your shield? I will not let you tear apart what I've built." Jake felt the air crackle, both a question and an acknowledgement lingering heavy above them. In that instant, he recognized the stakes were beyond mere words. He was treading the fine line between creation and destruction. Each side presented invaluable truths, but which path lay ahead? Suddenly, he wasn't just fighting for his future or the bison, he was wrestling with his own doubts, his identity. He stood on the edge of transformation, but in the absence of a clear resolution, what would he choose to sacrifice? The crowd gazed expectantly, their anticipation hanging in the air like the smell of rain before a storm. The crescendo of emotions threatened to burst as Jake steadied himself for the response, ready to face the implications of his next move. Would he remain loyal to the old ways, or could he redefine what that loyalty truly meant? The choice loomed, and Jake could feel it. This was just the beginning of an inevitable confrontation that would reshape everything. Jake's mind raced as the silence enveloped the gathering. He felt the weight of the rancher's challenge hovering around him like a specter, taunting him, pushing him toward a precipice he wasn't sure he was ready to cross. The bison loomed in the background, a symbol of resilience and adaptation, two qualities he desperately needed to embody in this moment. The rancher's defiance fueled Jake's determination. He knew he couldn't back down now. The stakes were too high. "We need to evolve together," he declared, his tone resolute. "Embracing change doesn't erase our past. It honors it by allowing it to grow in a new light." Yet, beneath his bravado, doubt clung to him like a familiar coat. Did the crowd truly see the potential in his words? Or were they merely caught in the crossfire of a heated exchange? Maybe they were only looking for reassurance, clinging to the very traditions that had shaped their lives. Ayanna stepped beside him, her presence a silent grounding force. "Some traditions must be cherished, but others need to be challenged," she added softly, her voice blending with his to create a new harmony. "The world is shifting, Jake. We can all feel it." Jake nodded, encouraged by her support. He looked over the crowd again, allowing his gaze to settle on those faces, searching for understanding. "I know change is hard," he continued, voice steady, "but I believe it can lead us to a future where we thrive together. I'm not asking you to forget your roots. I'm asking you to extend their reach." The murmurs shifted again, a ripple of curiosity punctuated by an occasional skeptical frown. Just as he began to feel a flicker of momentum, the rancher's hand shot up, slicing through the burgeoning hope. "And what do you propose, boy? An open land where anyone can come and take what they want? This isn't a playground for the whims of fancy." Every word was a clenched fist, reminiscent of the oppressive climates Jake had feared. His chest tightened as new thoughts sparked within him, unforeseen possibilities branching out like the roots of the old trees scattered across the land. He hesitated, glancing toward Ayanna, who offered an encouraging nod. "Perhaps we create a sanctuary, a place where people can learn to care for the bison and for the land itself. A community where we teach others about conservation and sustainability," he said, the vision stirring energy within him. "What if we could be the stewards of our history, blending it with a new ethos of responsibility?" He glanced back at the rancher, who seemed momentarily taken aback. "You want to turn this land into some kind of tourist attraction?" he scoffed, disbelief etched into his features. "No," Jake countered firmly. "This isn't about commerce, it's about connection. We can foster respect and reverence for all that this land has provided. It can embody who we are and where we are going." The crowd looked from Jake to the rancher as uncertainty began to morph into something new, curiosity fueled by a shared desire for progress. Could they be more than mere preservers of a legacy? Could they also become pioneers of their culture? "Think about it," Jake pressed on, heart thundering against the walls of his chest. "What if the bison teach us not just survival but collaboration? They thrive together in the wild, and we can embody that spirit. The land can be ours to redefine, but first, we need to shed the fear that binds us." The moment hung in the air, suspended like a tightrope walk over a dark abyss of tradition and modernity. He sensed the tension shift, a collective weighing of options stirred with the whispers of unease. Jake clenched his fists, the uncertainty now transforming into a heating conviction. This wasn't merely about the ranch. It was about creating something that encompassed growth, community, and a legacy rooted in reflection and understanding. What do you choose then? Are we going to be shackled by unyielding beliefs, or can we step forward into a new light that nurtures both our strengths and our surroundings? Everyone's gaze bore into him. He had set the stage for an essential choice, a transformative moment that would define him and perhaps even the ranch itself. But as hope flickered like a candle resisting a storm, Jake knew this was just the start of a battle that demanded not just external change, but the upheaval of minds and hearts. In the tension that ensued, he felt a pulse of possibility, and with it, the knowledge that he stood at a crossroads, ready to carve a path forward. What would it take to unify those hearts? Would he dare push beyond fear to transform not just the land, but the very fabric of their identities? Jake could feel the weight of the crowd's gaze pressing down on him, the mixture of skepticism and intrigue casting a shadow on his confidence. The rancher's dismissive scoff hung in the air like a challenge, daring him to prove his proposal was more than an idealistic fantasy. Doubts crept into his mind. What if he was offering a vision they couldn't grasp? What if this was just another false hope that would further divide them? He shifted his stance, grappling with those questions, mentally navigating through his vision like a rough trail still shrouded in fog. Ayana's quiet resolve flowed beside him, and he found solace in her unwavering presence. It was time to dig deeper, to pull forth every thread of conviction he possessed. What we create here can be more than just a haven for bison, he pressed, gesturing as if weaving a tapestry of possibilities. It's about intertwining our story with theirs, letting the land teach us harmony and resilience. Imagine a meeting place for educators, where families come together not just to observe, but to engage, to learn and restore. Historically, we viewed land as a resource. I propose we embrace it as a teacher, As he spoke, he realized he was not merely trying to convince the gathering, he was convincing himself. A flicker of confidence ignited within him, stoking the flames of his passion. Committed to his vision, he was constructing a bridge from the old world to a new understanding. The rancher took a step closer, a storm of emotions brewing in his eyes. You think the bison will accept your soft approach? They are wild beasts, not some myth to romanticize. This land requires strength, not sentimentality. Jake inhaled deeply, the challenge sending ripples of adrenaline through him. Strength isn't just about force, he replied, his voice steady. It's about adaptability and trust. Look how the bison migrate, guided by instincts honed through generations. They survive because they support one another. If we learn to unify our efforts, we may thrive just as they do. A murmur passed through the crowd, as if Jake's words had struck a resonant chord. For the first time, he believed they were beginning to see a different reality. He noticed nods interspersed among the skeptical faces, uncertainty slowly twisting into contemplation. The rancher's counterattack was a blindside. And who will decide what's best for our land? You, a naive dreamer? His voice sliced through the gathering tension, and Jake felt the familiar pang of self-doubt rear its head. But rather than retreating, a surge of clarity and purpose filled Jake's chest. No one person should decide. This is about collaboration, an open dialogue where we all have a stake and voice. The land belongs to all of us. We need it to voice what it yearns for, too. He could sense the shift in the atmosphere as grumbling reticence gave way to something far sharper, curiosity stirring like the first winds of spring. The notion of stewardship was taking root, loosening the stronghold of fear within him and the crowd. Still, Jake wrestled with his own rising anxiety. Would this moment transform into a personal revelation or lead to further isolation? The rancher, faced with unexpected unity among the crowd, narrowed his eyes. What makes you worthy of leading this change? The question struck deep, and Jake knew, in this moment, he had to reveal his truth. I'm just a cowboy who's willing to listen. I see the land not only as it is, but also as it could be. I want to be a mediator, bridging our past and future. Silence hung in the air, pregnant with expectation. He waited, daring to hope the essence of his plea resonated within them. The rancher hesitated, skepticism battling curiosity before turning away, wrestling with the implications of what he'd just heard. Finally, a voice from the back called out, "If this land belongs to all of us, how do we start making these changes?" Jake felt his heart race, a line finally drawn. The moment demanded action, and he couldn't afford to let it slip away. "Let's gather together to discuss small steps," he proposed, determination coursing through him. "Let's see if we can breathe life into this idea together." He held the rancher's gaze, steadying himself. This wasn't simply a discussion, it was an invitation to a potential transformation. The rancher, caught in his thoughts, seemed to soften his posture. For the first time, he looked uncertain, a crack in his hardened exterior. As the crowd buzzed with implications, Jake felt the crack take the shape of a question. Would his vision withstand the scrutiny of their unyielding traditions? With the weight of the unknown in front of him, Jake realized he had one last opportunity to solidify this fragile foundation of hope. But one thought consumed him. Was he truly capable of sparking the change he desired, or was he destined to remain bound by the very fears he sought to conquer? With resolve echoing in the stillness, Jake didn't just face his audience, he faced himself, ready to bridge the gap between the man they thought him to be and the leader he aspired to become. The bison surged past him, a powerful reminder of what was truly at stake. Jake stood firm, now embodying the spirit of both legacy and evolution. The remnants of his familial expectations lingered in the air, yet he found clarity amidst the tumult. He wasn't fighting merely for a piece of land, but for a future where diverse narratives could intertwine, flourish, and empower the community. As the rancher glared at him, the storm within began to settle. Jake realized he had finally crossed a threshold. He wasn't stepping into his father's boots. He was forging his own path, one that embraced tradition while paving the way for innovation. "This is about more than just cattle," he asserted, his voice steady in its newfound strength. "It's about redefining what stewardship means." The rancher, for the first time, seemed taken aback. His furrowed brow reflected confusion, perhaps even a flicker of understanding. "You think you can just reinvent everything?" he growled, yet there was a note of hesitance in his tone, questioning the firmness of his own beliefs. "Yes," Jake replied, unwavering. "We can create something new from these roots, not blurring the lines of tradition but enhancing them. We can showcase the beauty of our collective identity." Luna snorted beneath him, sensing the electricity in the air. Jake met Ayana's gaze, sharing an understanding that flowed deeper than words. Their destinies were intertwined, and this confrontation was transforming them. His conviction radiated throughout the crowd. They were no longer simply spectators caught in a power struggle, but participants in a dialogue that could redefine their relationships with each other and the land. "Wouldn't you want to be remembered not just as a guardian of tradition, but as a pioneer of conservation and community?" Jake pressed, urging the onlookers to envision a shared reality. The bison, moving as one, echoed the essence of unity he sought to create with Ayana's people, melding history and hopeful aspirations. A murmur spread through the crowd, a blend of skepticism and curiosity. His words invoked a shift, perhaps igniting light where shadows once prevailed. The vulnerability in their shared humanity began to surface, unraveling the knot of animosity that had previously bound them. He sensed the rancher's defenses wavering. "What do you mean to accomplish exactly?" was the next challenge. Yet the rancher's posture softened ever so slightly. The atmosphere felt charged with potential as Jake seized the opportunity. "I propose a sanctuary, a partnership with Ayana's people. We can create educational spaces where both visitors from afar and locals can learn about sustainable land management and the history of the bison. It would be a place of respect, connection, preservation, and rebirth, a collaborative model merging our histories," he laid out, the vision dimming the fury of past grievances. A soft gasp echoed through the crowd, and Jake aligned his thoughts to inspire others. He recognized that every member of the community had a role in this potential synergy. "This can be an opportunity where we can thrive together, building a legacy that supports conservation while celebrating our heritages." Just then, an unexpected voice raised above the murmur. A local elder, one whose wisdom had guided generations. "Jake's right. Our land deserves more than mere ownership. It deserves life, a legacy that breathes, he declared, drawing nods from those nearby. The elder's unyielding presence solidified Jake's resolve, lending further weight to every word. The rancher looked visibly shaken, grasping at something to hold on to, but the tide had begun to shift. "And how do we know it won't compromise our way of life?" he demanded, though with less aggression this time, more like a plea for safety in the face of change. "Together we'll ensure it doesn't," Jake responded, pressing his advantage. "Let's come together, establish guidelines that steer the land toward mutual prosperity without erasing what has always defined us. Show me how to incorporate what's essential to you. Let us sit down as a community, merging perspectives." The crowd buzzed, exchanging glances of tentative hope and intrigue. The rancher's grip on his worldview seemed to loosen, and at that moment, Jake recognized the profound shift occurring within him. "This isn't about you against me," Jake continued, encouragement drawing strength from Ayanna beside him. "It's about finding strength in us all. Embrace what ancient legacies, heritage, and the bison can teach us." The realization dawned on Jake. He wasn't merely advocating for his own aspirations. He was advocating for unity, for transforming fear into collaborative courage. Every heartbeat reverberated with integrity, and in the tempest of change, Jake felt solid footing beneath him. As Ayanna's hand brushed against his arm, he sensed a new chapter unfolding, not just for him, but for their intertwined futures. "Together," Jake said, more confident than ever, "we can shepherd the land into becoming a beacon for future generations, one where tradition meets innovation." The rancher's face softened as he absorbed the weight of Jake's proposition, a blend of challenge and collaboration illuminating a potential new path. "Perhaps," he began, uncertainty still lacing his words, "we could come together for the land?" With those words, Jake exhaled, a tidal wave of relief washing over him. He had faced the legacy of the past, transforming confrontation into collaboration, fear into shared purpose. Jake had achieved not just the honor of the moment, but the real growth of vision that extended beyond himself. He felt rooted in that moment of triumph, standing confidently beside Ayanna, realizing that the legacy of his family was no longer a burden, but a foundation for building something greater. They had established a commitment to the future, one where voices could meld together instead of crumble apart. The bison, once merely a powerful force, now symbolized this transformation. They had challenged the tradition, forcing him to reshape his understanding of identity, responsibility, and community. Jake smiled as the crowd echoed murmurs of understanding, hope rejuvenating the air with energy ripe for change. He had conquered the depths of his own uncertainty, yielding a resolution he had never deemed possible. They would craft a shared legacy amid adversity, one where the echoes of the past paved the way for a brighter tomorrow. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.